So, as Vinny just pointed out, having goals is absolutely essential. And I'm going to spend a couple minutes talking around why this is essential, why you should care, and give you some examples of how you can actually go about defining your goals. So, before I start, this is actually a massive room. Oh my God. How many of you here are using Google Analytics today? You just show your hands. All right, cool. About half, more than half of you. And how many of you here have defined a goal or have goals in analytics? Okay. Not that many. Not having goals is like saying you don't care about your business. You don't care about your website. If you're not defining goals, how can you actually succeed? How can you actually win? So it's like playing football without goals. You're just playing around. So the idea really is that if you don't have goals, you don't really have a way forward, you don't really have a way to succeed. And I'm going to give you an example as to why, for example, this might be something you should really, really, really consider. So we have a Google store where you can buy all sorts of cool stuff like this t-shirt. And if you were to look at the numbers of people visiting the store by country, you would see here in third position is Brazil. So you might deduct that Brazil is actually a solid customer base for the store. In reality, though, if you were to look at the conversion, you actually realize that they're not even in the top 10. So had you not implemented goal tracking, you wouldn't actually understand that this user base from Brazil is not converting. So having goals will give you an understanding as to actually the reality behind your metrics. So it's like you can actually see in the dark. And if you were to have goals, you're then actually able, as we can see here, come up with ideas as to how you can improve the experience for your Brazilian customers. So I'm pretty certain that the ones of you who actually raise your hands and have goals, you most likely have what we define as the macro goal. The macro goal is the point of purchase. This is like where you go to the thank you page, so you purchase something. We would also like you to think around what happens before the purchase. Not all your visitors come to your site and immediately convert. It actually takes time, and I'm going to show you another slide in a second, which actually discusses the path to purchase. So how do you measure success before you actually convert? And there are a couple ideas around this. So people research, they might sign up, they might engage with you in some sort of a way that might be valuable. And this is something you should think about. So how can you define success before the actual purchase, before the macro goal? So these are the micro goals. McKinsey did a study where they looked at the cycle. And the cycle of, turn off your phones. So the cycle of path to purchase. And it's pretty straightforward. It's very intuitive. I mean, we all have done this. We're all customers ourselves. It's really, you get an idea or you engage with a brand and you say, well, maybe this is something I'd like to purchase. And then you start researching. You start looking into it. And there's an entire process before you actually convert. And then you do convert, but then obviously that's not the end of it, right? So you want to engage your customers even after they've converted. And there's various ways of how you can actually do that. And that concept really is the retention of keeping that client happy and keeping them immersed in your brand. So this is a matrix which will hopefully allow you to identify or think around how to set up a checkpoint for this kind of customer journey. So the macro goal is the third step, which the majority of our advertisers have, if they have goals. However, we want you to think about the first two beforehand. So the kind of initial stage, define success. So what is success when you're building awareness around your product or your website? Second part is really understanding of how can you help them make that decision? How can you usher them slowly into making the actual purchase? And then finally, once they've made a purchase, how do you keep them? How do you keep them happy? How do you engage them? This might be your social strategy. This might be, allowing them to post a review. This might be there's tons of ideas here. So I was in Singapore earlier this week, and I thought it'd be great to watch a movie. And it occurred to me that actually watching a movie is a very, very straightforward purchase funnel, right? You probably know what movie you want to watch, you know what time you want to watch it, you know your location, and then you choose your seats. And you submit and you buy. Now, there's actually a lot more happening. That's the macro goal. But there's a lot more happening than just purchasing this. If you look at this site, you can actually see you can register. You can follow an RSS feed. There's even an application that you can download. So these would be the micro goals that the owner of the site would be tracking. And on the home page, there's an actual Facebook like button for Mr. Popcorn. So how do you go about defining these goals? How do you go about actually starting to think about these goals? So the first step really is our help center. And I hope you visit our help center quite a bit. It's actually, we believe, or we strive to make it one of the most comprehensive help centers there are. And there's an entire section dedicated to goals, step by step, how to define goals, how to think about goals, and how to set it up in analytics. We also have a session later, it was referred to already, in the afternoon with some of our partners. And they're going to go through and help you define the process, and they're going to go into a little bit more detail around goals. If you're currently not using Google Analytics, but you are using AdWords, you can use this tool, which is the AdWords conversion tracking tool. So even though you might not have analytics, you still should think around having goals set up and how you're able to then actually define a strategy around completing these goals. We've heard from John about multi-channel funnels. And to have this wonderful feature, to be able to use this feature, you need to have goals. That's a crucial thing to remember. If you want to use multi-channel funnels, you have to have goals or e-commerce tracking. And the concept behind multi-channel funnels is, if you go back to the football analogy, so the striker strikes the goal. That's your success. However, there's a lot more than the striker to a team, meaning you have a lot of assists happening. So you need to understand the game plan of your site. And this is for macro as well as micro goals, understanding who's assisting the actual striker to strike that goal. So it's not just about the strikers. Think about your entire kind of aspect of your site. And I've got some homework for you. So in your packs, this page is actually exactly as you see it here. Please fill it out. Think of the different paths to purchase, how this reflects to your site or for your advertiser site. And if you have any questions or you're struggling with any of these steps, you can speak to some of our partners in the afternoon or to myself. Thank you.